Story 1, being famous. Everything about my lifestyle and personality suggests it would make me miserable. But still, it is nice to daydream. Story 2, I love the idea of a threesome, but I would probably last around 30 seconds due to the excitement. Story 3, my death. I'm not suicidal, but the idea of permanent quiet is appealing. I fully want to live my life and will do everything in my power to do so. Have you ever experienced a complete sensory takeover where you cannot feel, hear, or smell? I have, and it was immediately comforting and relieving. Story 4. I often daydream about what would happen if I woke up in the past in my childhood body, knowing everything I know now. Story 5. Having the powers of the Infinity Gauntlet. I honestly believe there is no way I would use my powers for good all the time. Story 6. Being in a relationship with a very wealthy man sounds nice because I have a lot of financial anxiety, but I don't think I could handle the guilt of not contributing in real life. Story 7. Hurt comfort trope. I love the idea of someone caring for me when I don't feel good, but I don't want the actual hurt. Story 8. I have always fantasized about being a very good-looking guy and having girls talk to me unprompted, be nice to me, and actually be enthusiastic when engaging with me. However, I am somewhat introverted, and I can handle less than an hour of that before I mentally shut down and want to go home. The thought of entertaining everyone who approaches me throughout the day, when I have already run out of energy, sounds overwhelming. Story 9. Being able to fly. Knowing me, I would get myself killed flying too high. I would be more like Icarus than Icarus ever could. Story 10. Having access to my own pocket dimension allows me to take a vacation from others whenever I need to. Every time I use it, there is a 30% chance that it might freeze the universe in place eternally. Now it is awful. Story 11. Leaving everything behind, including all relationships, and living alone with a dog in a foreign country or at a lakeside house. Story 12. My ex, who manipulated me so badly that I experienced a breakdown and post-traumatic stress disorder, died in a car crash, leaving me to raise our children without constantly being told I am doing it wrong. Story 13. Kidnapping. I am well aware that my brain prefers the playful, light struggle fantasy version more than the grim, violent reality, but I find myself thinking about it a lot nonetheless. Also, on that note, clothing gags. Sock and panty gags are fun, but they definitely need to be a reasonably clean piece. That part of the fantasy is best kept purely as fantasy. Story 14. Surviving an apocalypse is difficult because I would likely lose many people and things that I care about. Story 15. I sometimes daydream about being able to pause time, freezing the world, and having all the time to myself to do whatever I want. However, if it really happened, it could be terrifying. I would never know if the world would start moving again or if I would get stuck in that frozen moment. Additionally, everything would be out of sync, and I would probably begin to feel like I was slowly losing touch with reality. It would be much less enjoyable than it sounds. Story 16. As a teenager, I used to fantasize about having a substance addiction that would require a planned intervention. I believe I wasn't receiving enough attention at home. Story 17. Making love to my friend who already has a boyfriend. Somehow, I find myself in a polyamorous relationship with them both, even though I only fantasize about her. Story 18. Getting pregnant and having a family can be enjoyable, and the idea of a family is appealing. Movies often portray childbirth as wholesome, sweet, and worth the struggles. However, reality can be quite different. I looked up episiotomy and discovered that cesarean sections can be more painful than that. Overall, it's a complex experience. Story 19. Sometimes I fantasize about a major cataclysm occurring, such as a giant meteorite hitting the Earth or a deadly virus that could completely disrupt our societies. I think about a time when nothing we are accustomed to will matter anymore. These are just silly thoughts. I don't truly want anything like that to happen. Story 20. Quitting my job and living the life I always dreamed of. Would it really be how I envisioned it? Or is the dream what keeps me going? Story 21. I sometimes have thoughts about doing harmful things to people I dislike. While it can be satisfying to consider, I know that in reality I would face many consequences. Story 22. Imagine a zombie apocalypse where you don't need to wake up early in the morning to go to school or work. Society has collapsed, and there is no one to judge your social status. Story 23. Hunting dragons in the style of a monster hunter. I am the skinniest guy, and I would die within 2 seconds. Story 24. Being married to my current partner is challenging. He and I are on opposite sides of the political spectrum and not on the same spiritual level. I am far from frugal while he is very frugal. Story 25. Being transported to my favorite books and movies is an amazing idea. However, as someone with autism who loves fantasy, I cannot imagine going to a world where I know nobody, am broke, nameless, and would probably not be able to find any restrooms. Story 26. I have a strong interest in the concept of infidelity, and I sometimes fantasize about my wife being unfaithful to me. However, it would be devastating if it actually occurred. Not because of the act itself, but rather because it would indicate that our marriage is struggling. Story 27. When I was a child, I used to fantasize about saving my crush's life by jumping in front of a bullet or a car. The fantasy conveniently never included the aftermath of my shattered life or death. Story 28. Being sick again in the hospital was tough. Everyone cared about me and helped me. I received daily calls and texts checking on my well-being and asking when I would be released. I don't think that's called Munchausen because I'm not doing anything actively to appear or be sick. But still. Story 29. I sometimes think about how it would be if my parents were to pass away. I am really scared of that day actually happening. Story 30. Having infinite wishes could become tiresome. Eventually, one might grow bored, and I wouldn't trust myself to avoid turning to evil or something similar. Story 31. To have an armor set, hear me out. It would be really cool to have full late middle-age armor, but where would I place it? I don't have much space in my room, and I'm quite tall, so the armor would be large and extremely noisy, and I don't like noise. The least and most important part is the cost. Almost 100,000 UAH for one set. Are you kidding me? It would take a significant amount of time to earn that much money. Story 32. Any scenario that involves intimacy or a playful relationship with monster girls can be intriguing. For example, a beach date with a haunted Victorian-era doll girlfriend or a romantic evening with biomechanical beings from secret government experiments sounds exciting. However, in reality, I would be quite fearful of such entities even existing. Story 33. Post-apocalypse and a school shooting situation. I have mapped out a clear plan, but I would likely be the first one to be killed. Story 34. My difficult coworkers are disappearing overnight. I don't wish them harm. I just wish they would leave. Hopefully, they find a place that makes them happier than they seem to be while at work. Story 35. I suffer from regular exploding head syndrome. I have always wondered what would happen if that really came true. All of it. Story 36. I frequently fantasize about a world without major powers. The United States is divided into 3 to 5 countries, Russia is as fragmented as the Balkans, and China is divided into 3 kingdoms. Story 37. Being able to change the composition of material around me, as well as my body, to potentially achieve immortality is a cool concept. I could do some amazing things with it. However, controlling such mass and transferring consciousness to non-living material would be a nightmare. Story 38. Being alive and surviving an almost extinction-level event, which caused society to collapse and brought down the banks. Story 39. I can answer for my husband and say zombies. Why does every man I know pray for zombies and wait eagerly for someone to ask them about their zombie escape plan? Story 40. A nightmarish world plagued by World War III, a 5-way civil war, and devastating natural disasters. I swoop in and have an epic base to survive in. Then I remember that millions must suffer for this reality, and that it is not a video game. Story 41. Having superpowers like Goku is dangerous. No one should possess that kind of power. Politicians wield less power yet often neglect their people. Imagine what a person could do driven solely by their emotions. Story 42. I don't think I've ever boarded a plane without imagining having to take over for the incapacitated pilots and landing the plane myself. In reality, every instance of the pilots of a regular passenger plane being unable to fly has ended with the plane crashing and nearly everyone dying. Of course, I could totally do it, but so far it has never ended well. Story 43. Coming from a broken home gives me a strong desire to fix others when it comes to relationships. There are many troubled individuals I have wanted to date. However, the same inclination that drives me to want to help people also makes me aware that I cannot. Instead, I simply develop crushes on women with complicated lives and keep those feelings as a fantasy. Story 44. Dying, I guess. Not so much anymore. I suppose every kind of escape mechanism sounds good in fantasy, but the consequences in the real world are harsh and uglier than expected. Story 45. Having sex every day with my wife and fooling around multiple times was intense. We went a week and a half straight doing something every night, and after all that, I felt like I needed a break. My mind wanted nothing to do with sex for a couple of weeks after that. My body simply isn't built for that anymore in my late 30s. I think about how fun it would be to engage in activities spontaneously, but sometimes I get sore, and my libido can drop, making it challenging to maintain that frequency daily. Story 46. Singularity meets cosmic horror. A science fiction scenario where a hyper-advanced artificial intelligence, similar to those found in Halo-type games, helps unlock the human mind to perceive reality beyond the veil. Story 47. Being rich is what I aspire to, whether it's old money or new money. It doesn't matter as long as I acquire a massive empire. I often imagine what it would feel like to be in those skyscraper buildings. But there's a downside. I can see myself alone, with no real friends, leading an unhealthy lifestyle, and possibly having a bad attitude. So no thank you. I'm good. But it doesn't hurt to fantasize, right? Story 48. Simply magic is starting to exist. Not the bloodline kind of magic, but the kind that anyone can use if they know how. It's nice to think of how convenient it might be for a while. Then I start thinking of the people who will abuse it and decide maybe it's for the best that it doesn't become a reality. Story 49. Stopping time would be perfect. I could take a nap whenever I wanted, and I could breathe and relax. The downside would probably be the guilt of possibly altering time and space. Story 50. To be honest, living a middle-class life with a wife and 2 children in a detached 2-story house, complete with a fence and driveway, while working a stable 9-to-5 job can feel limiting. Going on one overseas holiday each year and being surrounded by the same group of friends can create a sense of monotony. I often fantasize about this lifestyle because I appreciate the idea of belonging and having a predetermined path, but I also feel trapped and yearn for ways to break free. Story 51. Taken by aliens. I like to imagine that with their advanced knowledge, they could restore my health and return me to optimal physical condition, when in reality I would probably end up losing my mind. Story 52. Having Goku or Vegeta's abilities sounds like a lot of fun, but inevitably, one of my energy blasts would go astray and accidentally destroy something, or my transforming into Super Saiyan 3 would cause chaos in the world. Story 53. I often fantasize about an apocalyptic situation in my small town. Everyone has fled or died, and it's just me. I settle in the biggest house, then find all the pets left behind. I have a huge pack of dogs that will protect me from anything, along with cats to cuddle and keep away the vermin. I visit all the stores and gather supplies. I plant a garden, search houses for things I need, guns, food, and fun items I cannot afford. I collect horses, keep a few nice ones to help me with my work, and let the rest of the healthy ones live their lives freely in the forest while I care for the older ones. I travel to the cow pastures 20 miles away and bring them back so I can have milk and beef, though in real life, I probably couldn't bring myself to kill them. I also bring home a rescued llama that a rancher has and gather chickens for eggs. I add the rancher's guard dogs to my pack to protect the livestock. I create water filters and collect all my water from the springs and creeks. I live happily ever after. Story 54. Getting transported and living in another world sounds fun in theory, but in reality it is terrifying. Story 55. Some sort of disaster that would allow me to stop thinking about my career or life goals and simply be content with staying alive. I recognize that I am very privileged to be safe and sound, but humans are not meant to be satisfied with what they have. Story 56. I love the idea that when it's my time to die, I can swim out into the ocean, die peacefully, and my loved ones won't have to deal with my corpse. I love the ocean and feel at peace in it. The reality, however, is that it would be a painful death full of panic. While it may not be as bad as other deaths, it is far from peaceful. I probably wouldn't make it that far out, and my bloated body would wash up on a beach, likely ruining someone's trip. If I were identified, my loved ones would be pressured to deal with the situation, leaving them with a terrible last image of me. Story 57. When I was a teenager and not good at talking to girls, I used to fantasize that I could make any girl fall in love with me with a snap of my fingers. Years later, I prefer my own company, enjoying solitude and avoiding drama. Story 58. Zombie Apocalypse. Yes, I have watched too many horror movies, but I always find myself criticizing how poorly human survivors handle situations. I know I would be turned into a zombie within the first hour, but still. Story 59. Winning the lottery. Think about winning a large sum of money. Unless you are someone who has no one in their life, you will face challenges. Not a single relationship you have with anyone close to you, whether spouse, family, friend, or otherwise, will ever be the same for as long as you possess that money. You would have to keep the biggest secret and avoid spending too much to prevent suspicion. Even then, people will still wonder how you are doing so well and draw their own conclusions. Winning the lottery solves many problems but creates many in the process. Story 60. Having intimate relations with her and feeling the condom burst while she insists on continuing. She is someone else's wife or girlfriend. Story 61. I often daydream about God granting my wish to have 1.3 billion men vanish from the present for a long time, in order to improve life for everyone else. I have not fully considered all the potential drawbacks of that wish. Story 62. Attribute theft would be strange if I suddenly got someone's size, tearing my clothes while he shrinks. What would I do in that situation? Would I need to go to another country with a new identity? Story 63. I didn't have a name for them until recently, but I call them dark fantasies, misanthropic, nihilistic ideas. Nuclear war with China, specifically nuclear cruise missiles detonating over an invasion fleet in the Taiwan Strait. A multimégaton météorite Jérusalem. Other scenarios of that nature. I tend to spiral into these thoughts, but I need to better recognize when I'm doing that. Story 64. Having godlike powers to fix everything wrong with the world would be a responsibility I would take seriously. I would want to use these abilities for good, but I wonder about the potential consequences. Story 65. To be a Kardashian would be great with all the money in the world, but there would be too many eyes on me. Hollywood is also very strange. Story 66. Getting superpowers. Though I know I would eventually decide to take over the world and become a ruler. Story 67. I wish I could stop pretending to be interested in what my boss has to say, but I know that would certainly hurt his fragile ego. Story 68. The ability to teleport and save people by preventing harm. The sheer level of Captain Hindsight and thoughts of what I could or should have done would likely overwhelm me. Story 69. I imagine wearing a thong under my clothes and having my wife give me wedgies in public. This could possibly get us into some trouble. Story 70. I had to cut off one of my best friends earlier this year. He was everything to me, my literal meaning of love. I often think about when he might finally reach out again and how it will be, but I hope he never does. The situation between us does not deserve to flourish. If he does reach out, I will actually lose it. I feel so weak when it comes to him. I will probably have a panic attack as I have experienced one because of him before, so I know it's possible. I hope we just let it be with no goodbye and leave it at our last see you later. Story 71. My emergency plan for if the location I am in comes under attack. Realistically, I would probably freeze, but in my mind, I am convinced I could confront a shooter with a chair if I plan it correctly. Story 72. Being married to a person of the opposite sex is challenging. Although I struggle with my feelings, I understand that living a lie and using a man as a shield for my insecurities will drive me insane. Story 73. Being in the Avatar universe, with its TV shows, comics, and books, seems amazing due to the world building, culture, powers, and the presence of a savior, as well as the creatures and spirits. However, if it were real and not rated PG-13, the concept of humans possessing that level of power would be disastrous. Just look at how we handle our power now. Bloodbending, for example, illustrates this point. I have an avatar tattooed on my body, and I appreciate it as a means to disassociate and hyperfixate in a fantasy context. Story 74. The destruction of the entire state of Wyoming concerns me. I do not fully understand the reasons behind it, especially considering I am not American. Story 75. Literally anything I imagine. Sometimes Earth is struck by a meteorite. Sometimes I gain a magical artifact and play around with it. Recently, I have been thinking about what I would do if I had the power to pause time and unpause any person or object, or all of them at once. My imagination is limitless. Story 76. Being a super powerful vampire who is also a vigilante of sorts, I only consume the greedy and tyrants. Story 77. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that. Story 78. My partner wants to be more muscular. I have told him many times. He starts working out but then stops. He plays tennis once a week. It used to be twice, but we moved a bit farther away. He is a wonderful person with a great spirit, but his body could use some improvement. Story 79. I have issues with my mother. She is older now, but if it had been possible when we were younger, I would have felt differently. Story 80. I would never actually do it, but it's a small fantasy. As negative as it sounds, I have some unresolved feelings towards my father. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.